Hey everyone, Andrew here, and today I'm going to be talking about the movie version of A Wrinkle in Time. In fact, I'm going to be talking about both movie versions because Disney has tried to make this movie twice. The first time was a TV movie, then just this last week we had the new version with Oprah Winfrey and Reese Witherspoon and all that. And I'm going to talk about both and which one works well, which one didn't, my basic opinions of both overall. So I'm going to start with the original made-for-TV movie, which came out in the grand old year of 2003. Yeah, it's not that old. It's 15 years old at this point. But like I said, it was a made-for-TV movie for ABC. It wasn't extremely well received because it was a made-for-TV movie back in 2003. It had no budget. And for a show that kind of requires effects, at least in certain scenes, this one had really, really bad CGI. And I hate when people do that with older movies where they go, this is horrible CGI. I'm like, this was horrible CGI then. The story-wise, it follows the exact same story as the book for the most part. Sets it more in the 90s, so Meg is now a tomboy that has been getting into fights and having trouble. Charles Wallace is still smart, but he's now more book smart in that he studies things to be intelligent versus just being naturally smart. We're introduced to Miss Who, Ms.Which, and Ms.Which, and Miss Who shows up, and she is just the super negative person. She does not want those kids to be there. She doesn't believe in them. She's constantly saying this is a bad idea, we shouldn't do this. But they do the same jump into space, and Ms.Which transforms into this horrible CGI Sphinx. It's god awful. And shows them the kids this, and then they jump to the happy medium, which the weirdest thing for both of these movies is they changed the happy medium, who is clearly a girl, she's referred to as she in the book, to a guy in both. And this happy medium is basically just someone who watches way too many comedies. They just giggling and laughing ridiculously every couple seconds. It's a good representation of someone referred to as the happy medium, but yeah. Yeah, they go to Camel Toss and they try to do the bouncing ball, everyone in sync thing, but it's really off-putting and it's all done with this added effect of everything being gray and hazy, and it's just like, is not the best thing to look at. And we get to, Charles Wallace getting taken over and becoming evil, which actually is one of the things that worked really well in both films, but specifically this one, with Charles Wallace gaining those red eyes and talking demonically and being evil is actually super creepy. I found it really off-putting. It was like, oh wow, this actually works really well in a visual medium. We get to the rescuing of the dad and traveling off planet and being taken care of by Ant Beast. Like, it's a world supposed to be without light, and they don't even have a concept of light, and yet the entire house is bright white and very bright, and you see Ant Beast, and she is just a knockoff Chewbacca costume. It's really bad. Yeah. That was a little disappointing. And then we get to the rescuing Charles Wallace, and it's kind of cool because you got Charles Wallace with the red contacts yelling and saying things, but you also have Mr. Red Eyes representing the It, and he's there yelling, and it works really interestingly. Some bad effects, some bad shots in it, but mostly it's okay. My overall thoughts on the TV version is it's accurate to the book for the most part. It's just really boring with bad effects. It doesn't add anything to the medium. It doesn't add anything to the story that really works for it. It's just kind of, it's middle of the road. It's meh at best. The only people that give really good performances are Ms.Which and Charles Wallace, and everyone else is a little bit more iffy. Then we get to the modern movie, the one that just came out this year. I'm going to try not to spoil too much. I'm not going to go through everything like I just did with that one, because none of you want to go watch the 2003. It's not worth it. This one, though, actually is really good. I thought it was really well done. And it delves away a little bit more away from the book. Obviously, if you've seen the trailers, you've seen, shots that are like action-packed and them running away from things and this and that. And it's like, yeah, that's not in the book. They don't do much of anything in the book. Most of the book is just talking. So, of course, they're going to add stuff to make it more action-packed. I find it interesting that it's like, when I first saw the trailers for this and I'm seeing this, like, okay, we have an African-American lead with a white dad. Okay, so she's half. And I was thinking this was like The Color Purple or The Long Walk Home, where it's an African-American story that is aimed towards this, which would explain why Oprah agreed to do it type of thing. But honestly, no. In the book, she's clearly described as being a redhead, and it's fairly obvious that it's a white person. And I don't know if this is just because the director of this film is an African-American woman, or if the actress that they chose for Meg did a really good piece and they wanted to keep her. But it's interesting that, so we have that, and we have a white and an African-American mom. And then we have Charles Wallace, who's played by an Asian kid. And then they flat out make it that he's adopted. Okay. For me, that kind of ruins a little bit of the connection family-wise, because now, like, literally the dad will have nothing to work with, because it's his son, but it's not his son, he's adopted. And they add a little more, like, they tried to do this in the made-for-TV one, but it didn't work as well. They added a little more of the home life and the school life for Meg. And it's kind of interesting because Meg has a bully in this one that's picking on her, who is played by Rowena Blanchard, who is most known as the lead from Girl Meets World. So it was weird seeing the goofy nerd girl from Girl Meets World being the popular one making fun of another girl. They also managed to cut out the twins because Meg had 3 siblings, and 2 were a set of twins in the middle who were completely normal. And they cut them out of this film. And you know what? That's fine. They didn't add anything to the story at all. So it's okay to cut them out. And we are introduced to Miss What's-It, played by Reese Witherspoon, who gives the most insane performance of this. It's just really over the top and not particularly good, especially compared to the one in the TV movie, which was played by Alfre Woodward, who I remember from Star Trek: The First Contact and St. Elsewhere and a couple of other things. She's a really good African-American actress. And I thought that Oprah Winfrey was taking over her role, but it was actually Reese Witherspoon. She tries to be goofy and fun. It's really kind of weird performance-wise. And she keeps giving, like, backhanded insults, or it fits the character to a little bit. She's supposed to be a little bit ditzy, a little bit not aware of what she's saying, but yeah. So we meet her, and then we meet Miss Who, who's played by Mindy Kaling from, Project Mindy and all that. She does a really good job of this. It's actually a really good performance for her. I was very impressed. I like the fact that they aged down Meg, so Meg is very much a middle schooler in this, and it works really well having Maud aged down a little bit. Except surprisingly, Charles Wallace, who's aged up a year to be 6 instead of 5. And we get to the whole traveling through the Tesseract to other planets, which they explain better what the Tesseract is. It's the idea that our cells are split out, and our electrons and neutrons are spread out throughout all of space, and that we can connect to them and travel by connecting to that frequency across time and space. And they do a good job of explaining it, and like the way to find that frequency is actually through love. So that's a better use of the love idea in this one. And we get introduced to Oprah Winfrey playing Ms.Which. It's almost always gigantic. Like, she shows up first and she's like 7 feet tall, and then they go to that first planet and she's like two stories tell. It's really interesting and really bizarre, but good performance from someone who isn't really an actress, so she does a really good job. And we see Miss What's It transform into the flying beasts to show them the darkness, and like this was the first effect that I saw in the trailers, and my God, this is gorgeous. Now let's compare the new one and now the old one. Yeah, clearly one of these is better than the other one, but which is it? Yeah. So they travel to the Happy Medium, who's played by Zach Galifianakis, who is not at all what I was expecting, because it's like the Happy Medium, and it's weird. He's like, everything in his world is all like off kilter and doesn't balance well. So he's like, you need to find neither happy nor sad. You need to find the happy medium, which is like just a play on his name. It's like I am in the medium of everything, because he plays it very solemn and straight faced, and it works pretty well. And they took some liberties with this. They added some stuff into it. They added a lot of new effects, new things. Where it's like they added this idea that Camel Toss isn't just a planet; it is the source of the darkness itself. And they find out that the dad is on Camel Toss, and the three misses are like, okay, no, we're going back to Earth. We're going to rally the troops. We're going to come at this with a better plan. And it's actually Meg that ends up forcing them to end up going to Camel Toss. Some really bizarre, interesting effect changes for the Camel Toss world. I don't want to talk about too much of them, but it's like there's some that was like, all right, this is weird. And we meet the red-eyed man, who's now just referred to as Red, played by Mac Lapina. It was really interesting, the idea behind this. It's like he's very kind of goofy and not a threat and not scary. And he basically tricks Charles Wallace into joining them. And it pops out, and it just turns out he's just an actual puppet. Like, he's not even a real person that's being manipulated. He's just a literal puppet that collapses into nothingness. And we get a really good performance out of Charles Wallace, played by Derek McCabe. And it's creepy and well done. And I don't know which is better of the two. I think I would go with this kid's performance, because he does a good Charles Wallace and an evil Charles Wallace, whereas the other kid was only good when he was playing evil. But we get to the Chris Pine's character, who's been so much more fleshed out. We've got to know a lot more about him. And the only thing I think is kind of sad is they didn't include the Aunt Beasley at all. There's a shot where they're showing different worlds that the dad went to, and one of the misses has a throwaway line of, "Oh, look, it's Aunt Beasley." And that's the extent of what we get to see of Aunt Beasley. So, I guess that's one thing the TV movie did better. Not really. I'd rather have her cut out. It's not that important. Honestly, they balanced this a lot better. And I'm not going to talk about too much more about it, because it's giving away spoilers, and I don't want to do that. They added a lot to this story. So, overall, comparing the two, the first one is true to the source material, but is overall boring and low production. This one is a lot more or adaptation of a story. It's almost starts to fall into an in name only kind of clause, but it adds so much more of the right tone and the right feel to it that it helps. It actually helps add a lot more to this, because as a book wise, it's very kind of flat. It's very surface level, and there is so much more depth in this. There's a lot going on with Meg. She's having to deal with these conflicting feelings, and this feeling of hating herself and low self-esteem, and just her growth in this is a lot less forced and a lot more natural and works very well. And Charles Wallace's depiction, and they edited some stuff out for Charles, since he's no longer comes off as a mute and just talks to everyone, he's just overtly friendly. So it's like, it necessarily doesn't work, but it's such a good performance from the kid. I can understand why they chose to do some of these things that they did with it. Everyone, for the most part, does a very good performance. I like everyone's choices of it. The they add so much more to the dad's character, to Mr. Murray, played by Chris Pine in this, that you understand exactly what happened and how he ended up with this. And they take away some of the whole mystery of what he was doing. He was actually made it very clear what he was doing, and that everyone just thought he was crazy. And then he disappears for 5 years in this version, which is a long time, because I'm pretty certain the other versions was maybe a year or two at most. So 5 years is a very long time, especially with you have a now 6-year-old. So they literally, his son has almost never met him. Very good effects for the most part. There are a couple shots where you can tell they're 100% in a green room, and it's like these are shots that aren't gonna last the test of time. I got a lot of, like, it reminded me a bit of Spy Kids, where it's like there's just certain effects that at the time are pretty good, but you know, in like a few years down the line, these effects are gonna look very dated. And it's not necessarily bad, it's just loses a little bit of the timeless ability. But, you know, like I said, that first world that we go to and you see that transformation works very well and is really pretty and really well done. Um, the acting is very good. The storytelling is so much better. It's such an engaging, interesting story. If I take it away from the source material, if I look at this as just a film, it's a very solid, very good on its own film. If I'm comparing it to the source material, I think it takes the ideas of the source material and expands on them and gives it more to it than it originally had, but it's not the best pure adaptation. If you want a pure adaptation, watch the made-for-TV one. That said, I don't recommend watching the made-for-TV one. I do recommend this one. I thought it was really good. Like, I would give the made-for-TV one a 2 out of 5. It's got some elements of it, but mostly it's boring. This new one, I have to give it at least a minimum of a 4.75 out of 5. Like, it's nearly flawless. It's got some really good storytelling, really good characters, really interesting dynamics, and I would highly recommend it for anyone that's interested. It's like, I honestly would say watch the movie and you don't need to read the book. The book's alright. The book has some stuff into it. I'm pretty sure if you read the quartet, there's a lot more to it, but it's very surface level, and I think that they delve a lot more into and add a lot more to the film, and that's why I'd say recommend the film overall. But yeah, it's like, I was happy to read the books, happy to watch both of the films. I think, yeah, I'm going to say that the newest movie is by far the better of the three, and I really do like the way that they used color, and they used shots, and the way everything was done in this, and added a lot more elements to it. And the performances were so good in this one, with the exception of, like, Zach Galifianakis as the Happy Medium was just an odd choice, but I can understand it. It was an interesting take on the idea of the character. And then Reese Witherspoon, who honestly isn't bad. It's a little off, especially compared to the strong performances from everyone else. But overall, highly recommend. Happy reading, y'all.